we are going to get on to the background of PJ Harvey leading up to this album. But first, we are going to do a goddamn you, Alan. It is our favorite segment on the podcast, By the Numbers. And the first number that I'm going to throw out is 1 million, which is the number of certified worldwide sales for this album. It went platinum in both the UK and Australia, gold in France and Belgium, and it has 375,000 certified US sales. That doesn't get into gold certification, but it did sell a good amount. So, to our foreign listeners, please forgive us if we were more ignorant of this album than you were. Clearly, it was more successful other places than it was here. So, 16, as in the number 16, which is PJ Harvey's debut album. I'm sorry, 16, as in PJ Harvey's debut album, was listed as Kurt Cobain's 16th favorite album of all time in a journal found after his death.
Oh my God.
And I swear to God, there's like 400 top 10 Kurt Cobain albums of all time.
Yeah, where I feel like this
journals.
list this is like the number of people who are at Woodstock. It's 5 million people claim they were there. 1 million were actually there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of our albums might have made his list posthumously. If
exactly.
his list believed.
All right, 12. That is the number of instruments that PJ Harvey can play, including the auto harp and the accordion, which are clearly the coolest instruments for anybody to play.
I read that about her, and that's part of what bugged me about it not being a little more musical. She seems obsessed with these 2-chord vamps back and forth, and there's not a lot of that other textures, other sounds, or musical ideas present here. Maybe that was purposeful, but it bothered me.
Well, and when some of them do show up, it doesn't add a lot. There's a song we'll talk about later where it's either an accordion or a melodica or something, and for a moment it feels like it's a breath of fresh air, but then nothing happens with it, and it just feels like, well, okay, that was cool, I guess.
Yeah, and oddly enough, a lot of those extra instruments that are being played are not even being played by her, even though apparently she can play a ton of these instruments. So the number that we're going to go to next is the number 3, as in 3 albums on the list for PJ Harvey, including her debut album, Dry, and the follow-up, Rid of Me, released in 1992 and 1993, respectively. Again, very well loved by the Brits, critical darling. Yeah.
That seems excessive by almost any measure. I mean, come on, audience, please. I understand that you're yelling at your speakers now, but that's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot.
I thought I saw 4, but I know some of these lists are not always, I'm not even sure what the source of truth is, whatever the latest manual, I guess, or latest edition of his book. But yeah, I struggle with that too, and I did listen to some of her other stuff, which I think is better than this particular record. But in that 3 to 4 range, you're talking like the greatest of the greats, and maybe Dimery's British bias strikes again here.
Oh no, Dimery doesn't have a British bias. I don't know what you're talking about, man. He is a man of integrity.
He's gonna come on here one day and totally rip us all a new asshole. I'm sure.
Yeah, no, he'll just send one of his fucking assistants to do it, which is how he compiled most of this list.
Oh, I just looked up our list, and I think you might have confused it, Alan, with the sensational Alex Harvey band, which we could all look forward to.
Oh yeah, that was definitely it.
All right, the next number that I'm going to throw out is 2, as in 2 Mercury Prize awards. One given for this album in 2001, and again in 2011 for her album Let England Shake. The Mercury Prize, again, is for the best album released by a UK artist, I believe UK or Irish artist, in that year. And then the next number is 1, which is there has only been one artist to ever win the Mercury Prize twice, and it is PJ Harvey. The
wow.
Brits fucking love her. And probably going to get it up in arms because I don't think we love her nearly that much. It seems, again, excessive.
Well, geez, now that I'm learning all this, maybe we did just listen to the wrong record. Maybe the Albinator just threw us a curveball here. So I'm more than willing, regardless of how this goes, to give her some more shots, audience.
Yeah, I mean, she won it for this album, though. This was the one that they were like, oh no, this magnum opus for PJ Harvey.
Well, and that's what, again, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse on this, but there's the expectation versus I don't want to say the reality, my reality anyway, where in doing some of the research, the way we do this stuff, I kind of work some of this in parallel where there's a little bit of listening, a little bit of research, back to the listening. And so you're layering in some new information as you listen for the, 20th time or whatever it ends up being. And I was really struck by how critically acclaimed this was, and of its time too. There's been a lot of sort of posthumous or later on some folks like Pitchfork did their typical we're going to shit on it when it comes out and then rescore it, quote unquote, later on, so that we're on record as saying we thought it was good. Bunch of fucking hipsters. But I was just truly struck by how many lists this has shown up on. It's been on all these Rolling Stone greatest lists, and I mean, this is a heavyweight album critically, I think.
Let's just acknowledge that some of it must just be cultural. We always talk about this British bias, and maybe others living in other parts of the world understand this better than Americans, but there seems to be a whole ecosystem there, and certainly a whole separate culture that's just responding to this. By the way, I pulled up the Mercury Prize shortlist, the nominees for that year. And to be honest, I have only heard one of these albums other than the PJ Harvey album, which won, and we covered it. It was Super Furry Animals Rings Around the World.
Wow.
Okay.
Oh, and and there is a Radiohead album on here, but it's probably the worst Radiohead album, which is Amnesiac.
I still kind of like that album.
It's still pretty good because it's Radiohead.
Still pretty good. Yeah. I will say this. I went into this week wanting to like this album and listening to it 20 times with an ear towards wanting to like it. I don't think I could help but like it. And I could certainly see a bunch of critics going into listening to this album wanting to like it and writing a review that they do like it because that's almost what's expected, is that they're going to like it. There's certainly that bias. You don't want to be the one person who's just like, this fucking sucks. I don't know what everybody else is talking about. This is terrible. Even our boy Robert Christgau said something to the effect of this was her best work.
Wow.
Well, even the best are wrong from time to time.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the background of this artist. Oh, sorry. Before we do that, I just want to say before we get into the background of this artist leading up to the album that we love doing this podcast. We love you for listening. We really appreciate everybody who chooses to spend their time listening to us ramble on about albums that they love, hate, or have never heard of before. And if you want to show us that you appreciate what we're doing, there's a couple of ways you can do it. I think one of the easiest things you can do is just get on our mailing lists. If you just send an email to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com with the subject line, add me, we will add you to our mailing list. Certainly, I'm not going to spam you. Everything we send out is going to be about any upcoming bonus material we have, any upcoming albums that our bands might be releasing. That's probably the closest that we're going to get to spam for you. That would certainly be a great way to get involved. You can also visit our Patreon page, 1001 Album Complaints on Patreon. We have a great community over there. Really funny comments that people make in the comments there, oftentimes shitting on us for our takes on some of these albums.
Dude, I gotta say, I know we've been saying it week over week, but they continue. The comments are fire. The comment section keeps getting better, dude.
It really does. I am tickled pink when I go in there.
It's taken our medicine. I feel like, we're dishing it out here every week, but hey, we get to take it a little bit over there.
Yeah, exactly. And we love you all for supporting us on Patreon. You can go in, join as a free member if you want, or if you want to, buy us a beer while we do our exhaustive research on this. $5 a month gets you access to a lot of extra bonus content on there. We have Guilty Pleasures up there. We have our song battles up there, where we really just kind of get a little bit less constrained by the format of the list and get to really talk a lot of shit on the stuff that we love. So love to see you guys over there. Or love to see you all over there. I don't want to gender that. Love to see you all over there. But just by listening, you're supporting us, and we absolutely love you for it. So let's get into the background of the artist leading up to the album. I want to preface this by saying that I am by no means a PJ Harvey expert. I know she's somewhat of a national treasure to the UK. Please excuse any lack of context or errors that are made here. Again, she has lots of albums on the list, so we're not trying to cannibalize all the future content. This is going to be by no means an exhaustive history of her leading up to this album, but we are going to give you hopefully enough that you can understand where she was coming from if, like us, you were not super familiar with her back catalog. So, Holly Jean Harvey, born October 9th, 1969, in the town of Bridgeport, which is a small market town in the southwest of England. Now, I don't have a ton of info on her parents or the wealth of her parents, but I'm just going to guess that she grew up pretty damn comfortably because her parents owned a quarrying business. So, they're business owners right there. That's pretty darn good. They also had a family farm that she grew up on. So they have a house and a lot of land. Also seems pretty comfortable. Something tells me that they were probably relatively wealthy. Another thing that is kind of a cue or kind of a clue that they were relatively wealthy is that they counted amongst their best friends keyboardist Ian Stewart, co-founder of the Rolling Stones.
Oh, that's the guy that got kicked out for being too ugly?
That's the guy that got kicked out for being too ugly. Yes, he was removed from the official lineup in 1963, but he did continue to play piano for them as not an official member of the band, and he was their tour manager for something like 20 years. So he was probably doing okay.
He was doing it.
all
I'm
right.
sorry. That was a little mean. To be clear, if I had been in the Rolling Stones, I would have been that person, I'm sure.
I think we probably all would have been that person. Although, honestly, Mick Jagger's not that great looking guy. He's got a bit of a weird look going on. He actually kind of has a little bit of a PJ Harvey look going on in that they both have very wide mouths,
Hmm.
which is very good for a singer. Which Alan probably gets back to a little bit of your comment of like, you got this big wide mouth that can belt while you singing softly at me. Like, give me some like primal scream shit. Anyway, um, her parents are friends with a Rolling Stone. They're clearly into music. And from an early age, they fostered PJ's interest in music. They would go to lots of shows, and it sounds like they would even arrange to put on shows at their family farm. And I'm gonna kind of guess that if you're best friends with a Rolling Stone, you're probably not putting together like dad rock cover bands for your shows at your family farm. It's probably some pretty fucking heavy hitters coming to those shows, which is pretty damn cool. So from early on, she is not only introduced to music, but I think also shown that being a musician is a viable career path, which I feel like when I was 15, 16 in a band, my parents were like, you're never going to make any money playing music. You need to do something practical. They weren't like, that's actually totally a realistic thing for you to do. You should totally play more music and get really into it. They were kind of like, yeah, you should fucking study and, learn how to do math because ain't nobody going to pay for your shitty songs.
I mean, even if the band kicks you out, you could just manage them for the rest of their life.
Exactly. I mean, music is a business. There's a business side to it. I could have clearly been like, oh, I'm not that great of a bass player, but I can, organize a tour or something like that. I can go be the guy who goes and demands the money at the end of the night,
Oh
certainly.
yeah, that was Tom's job in our touring band days.
Yeah. I'd be like, hey, listen, where's that $37, motherfucker? Like, I'd be like, I
And then
mean,
if you
here, I get
pocket 30 of
220s. How
it,
about you take that? Like,
Literally cannot pay the bar tab without it, so you better hand it over.
yeah. So from an early age, she's clearly into music. Honestly, how could you not be if that's your childhood experience? She has an interest in music at a young age and learned multiple instruments over the course of her life. But at a young age, she did receive guitar lessons, probably around the age of 16, from a guy named Steve Knightley, who was also like a pretty successful singer-songwriter in the UK, part of the duo Show of Hands. And that he was an instructor at the school that she went to. So again, these are all just kind of clues that she's probably was raised relatively wealthy. And I don't say that because I'm jealous, even though I am. I say that because I do think that there is a necessary comfort level that one has to have to approach one's music career the way that I feel like she has approached it, where it hasn't necessarily been like, this is a make or break thing. If I don't make it, I'm going to be living on the streets type of mentality. It's more like I just kind of like to do what I like to do. And, people will probably like it and that'll be cool. And I'll make some money and tour and that'll be fun. As opposed to, I'm working as a bagger at a fucking Safeway and this is my only shot to the top type of thing.
Well, look, I
Seriously.
mean, I think there's something to be said for growing up in a supportive environment, no matter what your thing is, whatever the itch you want to scratch. If you can do it and do it for the right reasons, now contrast that with this idea of, the hard living, blues guy that's got a, fight and claw and, that's a whole different, animal right there. But yeah, I think that tracks with that supportive environment for sure.
Yeah, I would just say that a very uncharitable view of that is that you're just like a fucking tourist who doesn't really need to worry about money and you kind of can just do what you want and you're like a hobbyist who's just like, maybe it'll take off, maybe it won't. You don't have as much skin in the game. That's a very uncharitable view of it. Another view is just that, hey, you got to decide what you wanted to do. Good for you. And this is what you wanted to do. And you were very successful at it. So also good for you. I'm not necessarily taking the approach of, I used to have, for context, I used to have a thing against Julia Louis-Dreyfus because she was like already a billionaire before she got the job on Seinfeld and, you know, had that support to be able to try to go out and go to auditions and get all those roles. I've realized that that's kind of a dumb opinion and that clearly she's very funny and clearly she deserved it. And so I'm trying not to bring that baggage to the PJ Harvey story again, because listeners, I actually have no evidence whatsoever that she was just like kind of financially comfortable for her entire life and supported. I'm
Well,
just being an asshole about it.
and worked for it. You don't, the truth is, you don't really take off unless you really work for it. So it's great to have support. It's great to have a safety net. Obviously, that and an encouraging, loving family that says you can go try this thing. And if you fail, it'll kind of be okay. But you still got to try and you still got to try hard.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there's no hiding in this type of industry. Now, you can definitely get your break if you are connected, if you're wealthy. You certainly, no one's going to deny that. But for people to like you and for you to have an enduring sort of impact, you have to be good, and that has to come from work. So yeah, I think we
Yeah.
know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Counterpoint, Nana Cherry. So.
Ew. Well,
Well, she only lives on because we insist that she live on in
That's a
our
good point. We're the only people talking about her at this point.
you know what? I swear to God, I was at like a work function with my wife where they took us all to a Caribbean island. It was pretty swanky and awesome.
wait
And we
wait
were on,
and you're railing against the privileged folks
oh,
of
dude, I'm a
society.
fucking asshole. I don't deny that. But we were on like a party boat, and I swear to God, the woman that was sitting next to me was like, "Can you play Buffalo Stance by Nana Cherry?" And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? What the hell?"
Tom puts his head up out of a drunken stupor.
I just immediately was like, "Oh, of course I knew all about it." And I was like, "Oh, from her album, Raw Like Sushi." Yeah. Anyway,
That's funny.
so she joins a few bands while she's in high school, playing saxophone in one and guitar in another. It's nothing serious. I don't even think there's any recordings from that time. She graduates from Beaminster, I believe, in 1987, which was the kind of nice boarding school that she was going to, and goes to college in nearby Yeovil. So she's still living in like small town southwestern England. She's not like, I moved to London to try to make it or anything like that. She moves to a small town with a college there. I think there's like less than 50,000 people in the whole area or something like that. And in a move that should surprise absolutely nobody, she decides to major in visual arts because her whole vibe is kind of like, I was a visual arts major in college and then I just decided to make this music thing happen.
Yeah, art school is definitely all over this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's very interested in music. And in 1998, she joins this Bristol-based band called Automatic Delamini, which is a fucking terrible name. It has a Delamini. I'm guessing that's pronounced Delamini. Automatic Delamini.
If
Stupid
only
name.
their first album was had a contained a pronunciation key like Leonard Skinner.
So it gives her a lot of experience playing with other musicians. And I think that that definitely serves her well later in her career. So that group was founded by John Parrish. It's one of those groups that doesn't seem to have any permanent members except for the founder, John. And John goes on to collaborate with PJ on many later albums, but none of the ones we're talking about today. So she's playing sax, guitar, and singing backing vocals in this one. And I feel like the experience of being a position player in a band is really going to serve you very well as a songwriter and song constructor later. You have to worry a little bit more about the interplay. I feel like some people who kind of get their start and all they've ever been is the songwriter, they sort of expect everything else to conform to the songs that they write, as opposed to understanding that you have to like sort of make all these pieces fit together sympathetically. So I also think that playing the saxophone is like kind of analogous to playing the bass. It's a lot of melodic lines. A lot of times it's lower on the register for a lot of saxophones, playing single notes and stuff like that. So I think that those three aspects together, learning how to sing and construct harmony, doing rhythm guitar, and playing saxophone, I feel like gives you a pretty good idea for how to construct a song melodically, at least.
For sure. I
So,
mean, it
what's up?
sounds like the look, I mean, whether it's 15, 16, throw a number of instruments out there. I mean, it sounds like she came at this from a really well-rounded, perspective. And this wasn't some ego-driven like flight of fancy. I'm the lead singer and you're gonna work around what I want to sing. I think that her chops seem, fairly well established in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and also not a Prince situation where she's like, because I can play every instrument, I'm going to play every instrument on this album, or like a Lenny Kravitz type of thing. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but that's probably not going to lead to the best results. Although I do think Prince, generally speaking, kind of killed it on most of those albums. I know Rob is shaking his head in disbelief right now.
Yeah, I'll pencil that in for later, diving into the Prince catalog, Tom.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So she has this experience being kind of a position player in this kind of ensemble band, and she also makes the connection with Ian Oliver and Rob Ellis. Ian Oliver is a bassist, Rob Ellis is a drummer, and she goes on to collaborate with Rob Ellis for a huge part of her career. She doesn't get a lot of stage time playing with this band. Oh, sorry. She does get a lot of stage time playing with this band, even though she doesn't get a lot of chances to be out in front, but it does get her used to touring. So they tour pretty extensively through the UK, into Europe, supporting their debut album, which PJ actually doesn't appear on, but it gives her the bug to want to play live, which it seems has become kind of a lifetime obsession with her. She has said in interviews that in terms of what she likes more, writing, recording, or performing, far and away, no contest, it's performing. That is her favorite thing to do. She loves this sort of ephemeral aspect of performing a song in a moment in time, kind of can't pin it down. A bunch of people are experiencing it all at the same time. It's kind of unique experience. It's a little bit of a highfalutin way to think about concerts, but I can totally get that for most of her career, looking at the trajectory of her career, it seems like she's putting out albums just to support tours so that she can go out and tour and get in front of people.
Well, I think that tracks with her image as, or the perception of her as I don't know. I think I used the term tour de force earlier. I'll use it again because I'm lacking other, synonyms, but I think that seems to track with this concept of somebody who is bringing a lot of energy to what they're doing. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think there's a lot of people like that. I've obviously it's nowhere near the same type of thing, but I've always enjoyed the in the moment aspect of playing live more so than what can sometimes be a grind of writing and recording, even though there's obviously something to be said for the finished product. But I think that makes sense.
Yeah, they're different disciplines, and you have to focus on getting good at each one of those. And it sounds like for a lot of her career, she is focused on just being good at performing live. Not that she's not good at the recording aspect either, but it does sound like she's really the most inspired by the live performance. So she plays with this band, Automatic Delomany. until 1991. She decides that she wants to leave and she forms a new group with Ian Oliver and Rob Ellis called the PJ Harvey Trio, which is not a very good name. But I get that they were trying to put out
Easier
there
to
that they were a
pronounce.
band, they weren't like, it wasn't her solo work or anything like that. So they have some moderate success, but then Oliver leaves. After replacing him, they relocate to London, where there's like an actual big market and they have a chance for a breakthrough. But not really because PJ is like, let's move to London so we can try to make it. It's because she got into a sculpture program there and is still kind of like, I don't even know if I want to be a musician. Maybe I'm going to be a sculptor. Yet another discipline where it's like, you're not going to make any fucking money doing that. Why are you okay? Yeah, go ahead and get a degree in sculpture. I'm sure that's going to really help you out in the
Look,
job
you've
market.
never felt the urge to sculpt something. It calls to you.
As the wise men once sang, if I was a sculptor, but then again, no.
No. Thanks, Bernie. Anyway, so they're in London. They get some demos recorded. They pass them out to a bunch of labels, and a small independent label named Too Pure says, "Yeah, we'll put out a single from your demo. It's the song Dress." Now, this ends up being a huge turning point, not because Too Pure does any promotion for it or anything like that. It just happens to make its way into the hands of John Peel, who also happens to be at the time guest writing a column in Melody Maker. And he hears a song and he loves it. And he basically says it's like the song of the week in Melody Maker. And it gets a whole bunch of play. And that really breaks her career wide open. Or when I say her career, this is technically a band. It's not her solo work at the time, but for all intents and purposes, it's her solo work. Anyway, they get some heat on the first single. They release another single, also get some heat. And then they release 1992's Dry, her debut album, which is on the list. And that is released under just the name PJ Harvey, even though they are considering themselves a band at the time. I listened to that album. It's pretty good. It's like DIY, less mature, but it eventually goes silver in the UK, launches her career. She wins Best Female Singer of the Year and Songwriter of the Year from Rolling Stone, and it nets her a major label record contract with Island Records. She ends up recording 1993's Rid of Me, also on the list, with this guy, Steve Albini. And
Some guy.
Good callback.
and it is again, it's a critical hit, goes silver in the UK, but it goes much faster. It goes silver much faster than Dry. Dry kind of eventually went silver, but Rid of Me goes silver pretty quickly. This allows them to go out and tour, but the touring schedule starts to fray the relationship with their bandmates. And again, even though the group is called PJ Harvey, she pictures it as a band, but they kind of dissolve. And then this is where she truly goes solo from there on out. She puts out 1995's To Bring You My Love, which represents her first time working with Mick Harvey, no relation, who appears on Stories from the City. And this album had the song Down by the Water, which y'all probably remember from the 90s. It got a bunch of radio play, it got a bunch of MTV play. That ends up being her first big American hit, and it nets her first million sales worldwide album. And about a third of that comes from the US. So I think like 375,000 copies were sold in the US. Also nets her 2 Grammy nominations. So again, like this is the peak of a career, right? You got a hit album in the US, you sell 1 million records, you make it the grade, as they say. You get a couple of Grammy nominations. She releases 1997's Is This Desire, which also nets her another Grammy nomination.
Jeez.
It is, however, not nearly as well reviewed when it first came out, but it does get, Alan, what you're talking about, a lot of that sort of, post revisionist history reviews are saying that, no, this actually was a great album. But I do think that it kind of impacts her decision on what to do with her sound. Maybe she's thinking her sound's going a little stale because it only sells about half as many albums as To Bring You My Love does. So She sold 1 million with To Bring You My Love, sold 500,000 with Is This Desire. And, she had kind of stated early in her career that she thought the purpose of a song was to be a soundscape carried by the sounds of the song. The lyrics were less important. Apparently, she refrained from even writing down her lyrics until I think it was Is This Desire might have been the first album that she actually like wrote down the lyrics, even anywhere, because she didn't think that they were that good. She basically was like, yeah, I don't think that they're
You
that good, and
mean
I'm
wrote
better
them
at the musical
down?
side.
You mean wrote them down to go into the studio with, or you mean wrote them down like in the liner notes?
To hear her tell it, like wrote them down to go into the studio with.
Oh, wow. That just
Yeah.
Just
seems
all in her
lazy to
head.
me. Yeah.
I based upon the interview where she was talking about that, it really seemed like it was insecurity. Like
I
she was
see.
just like, they were bad. I don't think that they were very good, and therefore I was a little embarrassed by them and I didn't want to write them down.
All right.
So what she did say is that she would like kind of purposefully obscure her lyrical content in a lot of the songs to make it so that you couldn't tell what she was saying. Like she viewed the voice more as an instrument and less as a storytelling device. And I just think it's crazy that her and Tom York became friends. Like with such radically different approaches to the way that they sing. How could they possibly become friends? So you can kind of chart the direction of songwriting style on her albums up to and including Is This Desire, as starting in this kind of stripped down DIY style, moving to a more affected soundscapey style. Again, less focused on vocals and storytelling, more focused on building out these sound collages. And whether or not it was because Is This Desire didn't perform as well as her previous album, or if it's because she just thought that she wanted to try to move on to a different phase in her life, she very purposely said that she wanted to change up that approach for her next album. And that ends up being 2000's Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea. So she said that she had been purposely forcing herself to write poetry for a bit before she was creating this album. And she said most of it was really terrible, but she was trying to up her lyrical game. And so she was like, I'm going to write poetry, even though I know it's kind of shitty and it kind of sucks, because I know that if I want to go in the direction of not this affected, overdriven sound and pull it back and strip it down a little bit more, the lyrics are going to have to be a real shining component of that. And I don't personally dislike her lyrics on this album. I think she has a very direct approach to storytelling. Like I said, it's very economical, plainly stated imagery, just kind of slices of visuals of New York a lot. But it sounds like you guys think that it kind of falls short. But I would say that she probably thinks that it also kind of falls short.
It's
I
hard, no doubt about it. I just was expecting more, but yeah, she does what it is. What it is.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that economical is one thing. I have no problem with that. Like I'm a big fan of John Steinbeck and some of those novelists that were known for being a little bit more straightforward. I think something that I learned in taking writing classes in college and being in the journalism space was this idea of don't show, don't tell, don't state, render, that sort of thing. And I agree with the point Rob made earlier, where there's just too much in my mind on this album of, yeah, I was looking at a window and could see five bridges and someone said something, and it's like, I don't know, I don't feel like that is particularly moving, which to me, I wouldn't call that economical necessarily. I would just call that less, I don't know.
Less developed.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't find the words to say that she can't find the words. That's what you're trying to get across here.
Hey, I'm not PJ Harvey.
Fair
That
enough.
critique
Fair
was a
enough.
tour de force for me. Anyway.
All right. So it's 1999. PJ Harvey decides she wants to go live in New York for 9 months to shake up her life, get her into a creative headspace. She had spent a month there in 1998 while doing a film called The Book of Life, where she plays Jesus's assistant, which is a very, yeah.
He needed one of those. He had a
Sounds
lot
like an
going on.
interesting premise. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got like fucking 13 guys that he's trying to, coordinate all
Busy
their
social
activities.
calendar, if nothing else.
Yeah.
He's a chief of staff. It sounds like that's the
He
role
has,
he needs.
he has like 4 times as many friends as I did when I was 30.
Yeah. Yeah. But none of them betrayed you to your death yet.
Yeah.
There's night is young.
Yeah. All right. So she saw this time in New York as like a big injection of creative energy, feeding off the energy of the city. And I don't think that she was super successful in feeding off of the energy of the city, but I did see some interviews where she was saying, when I was at my most depressed, I actually wrote like some of my happiest and most up-tempo songs.
Hmm.
And when I was really sad, I've written beautiful stuff when I was sad. I've written lovely stuff when I was angry. So it doesn't sound like the energy of her mindset or the environment directly feeds into the content of the songs. So maybe that's where the sort of misconnection between the New York energy and what was presented on the album manifested.
Where does the sea aspect come in? Is that in relation to, because I thought I saw somewhere that she may have written some of this back home in
Yeah,
England?
yeah. She
Is
wrote some of
that
it back home in
where,
England too. Yeah.
because I don't know, I maybe I was expecting some tale of contrast or scene
Yeah.
setting, but the to me the sea part of it didn't shine through the way that the city
Yeah.
aspect at least did
You wanted songs
superficially.
about psychedelic crustaceans and whatnot.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Give me
Yeah.
the mollusk
Not
now.
enough.
All right. So one of the things that I've always thought about with New York personally is that there is this indoor outdoor contrast, which I think is like more pronounced than in frankly any other city that I've ever spent any significant amount of time in, where when you're outside in New York, it's fucking crazy and you're constantly like weaving in and out of people. There's like just people on the streets. The presence of people is so insane. And then when you get inside, it's like this like sort of like quiet sanctuary where you're sort of like, okay, I'm inside now. It's like the contrast between inside and outside is just so much more pronounced. And I live in San Francisco. It's a major city. It does not have that same feel when you walk around downtown that New York does, where you're just like, there's so many fucking people everywhere and nothing's ever stopping. It's crazy.
Well, the
I mean,
spaces are
it's
inherently smaller too, so there's probably more of a sense of like intimacy when you're inside,
Hmm.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, the density is just not at all the same. It is. I'm always struck by that as well. That San Francisco is this major world city that has fewer than 1 million people in a similar amount of space as Manhattan, that has 7 or 8 million people. So yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that if I was looking at how she captured the energy of New York, a charitable view would be that she captured the indoor New York energy, not the outdoor New York energy. The
Hmm.
private energy of being in a house and, being in, like you said, Alan, that small, intimate space with other people, hanging out on rooftops and not on the subway at rush hour in July type of feeling. That could be a charitable way to look at how she captured the energy of New York.
Well, and everyone's experience of it is different. If you're there to film a movie, you among other things, it's going to create, or whatever you're doing there. Everyone's experience with it is going to be different. I if I lived in New York, for example, I'm not the kind of person that would thrive on the nightlife or those types of things, and so I think everyone finds their own pocket of things that speak to them wherever they are, and so that just might have been what
Certainly.
she was sort of feeling,
Yeah.
with this record.
And it's not like she was like spending 9 months in New York as a cashier at a souvenir store, having to get up early. Like she was kind of could do whatever she wanted.
She's not
And
selling
so
fake Oakleys outside the train station or something.
exactly, exactly. So one of the things we have not talked about, we kind of have touched on it a little bit, but that on this album, Radiohead's Tom York does make an appearance on a couple of different songs. And I found it interesting that she actually met Tom York in 1993 when Radiohead opened for her at a show in New York,
Hmm.
which that probably would have been a pretty damn good show to go to. So, 93, before Radiohead really broke with Pablo Honey, they opened up for her and they ended up becoming friends. They stayed in touch throughout the years, mostly through writing letters to each other, which is just such a fucking weird art schooly kid thing to do. Like just write letters back and forth to each other. I get it was the 90s, but it wasn't the 1790s. Like there
I
were
feel
other means
like
of communication.
Do you have like a feather tip pen and
Yeah.
like
yeah, I feel like when Tom York writes a letter, he's like in a tower and he attaches it to an arrow and shoots it out of it. You know?
puts it on like the back of a raven and just sends it
Yeah.
off?
I'm picturing the scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail where the guy's like trying to get saved from the marriage. He's just shooting the arrow out the
Oh
window.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah,
waifish guy.
totally.
So anyway, she said that actually her friendship with Tom York has been particularly important to her. And one of the things that I guess I kind of didn't think of, I probably should have thought of, is she's like, yeah, you know, I need friends who know what I'm going through and people that I can talk to about that. Frankly, if you're like going to your friend who's an account manager, like middle level manager at some place, you're complaining about like, oh, I had to go do another interview for Rolling Stone and fucking tour again. The limo picked me up. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, I
Yeah,
would kill for your life. But,
it's
it's got
kind
to be a
of
grind.
it's kind of like when you're complaining to your fellow podcasters being on a Caribbean vacation that was paid for and listening to
About how
Nana
someone
Cherry.
likes Nana Cherry.
I didn't complain about that. I said I was incredulous that somebody actually complained about it. Rob, your
I'm just saying I
passport
know what
is
you're
more
talking about.
stamped than anybody I know. So, all right.
Just saying I understand. You made a good
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, let's focus on the fact that someone requested Nana Cherry. All right, that's the real lesson here.
But also knew nothing about the rest of Raw like sushi. I was fucking disappointed.
I
They,
love
they
that
didn't do a deep dive.
Yeah.
we've crafted a world for ourselves where you know more about Nana Cherry than the Nana Cherry super fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was like, you down with man child? Yeah, you want to talk about that? No? Okay, fine.
What about
Oh
Eagle
man.
Eye Cherry? Any requests come in for that?
No, nor buck cherry.
Oh God, I would have jumped off the fucking boat at that point.
All right. So this gets us to the point where PJ has solicited from Tom York, hey, I wrote a song specifically for you and had been apparently thinking about writing a song specifically for Tom York for a while. We're not going to talk about that song today, but she approached him with this idea of, I have written a song specifically for you. I'd love for you to come and sing it. I believe it's that song, The Mess We're In. And he does come and sing it. And I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album. So I didn't put it on the list.
It did not save the album.
No, it did not save the album. So we get to the recording of Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea. She teams up again with Mick Harvey, and Rob Ellis, who, remember, he had played drums with her in that trio, and he actually played on her previous album. And so they all three set out to make this album. They all three get producer credits. There was no outside producer, just the three of them. They end up recording at this place called Linford Manor, which is actually really cool. So it is a house it's like a big manor house, and it was converted into a recording studio in the mid 80s. And the city basically invested a bunch of money to turn it into like a performing arts center. And it was a performing arts center for a while in the 70s. And then somebody bought it in the 80s and turned it into a recording studio. And it was like one of the first studios in England to heavily invest in digital recording. And just seems like a really cool environment. It's just like 17-room house or something like that. And the first floor is all just different recording environments. And the top floor is where the artists live when they record there. So she got to spend something like 6-7 weeks there recording this album. It just seems like a really cool environment. And unfortunately, it is no longer a recording studio because some rich asshole bought it and kept it as a recording studio for a few years and then just turned it into his own house. So now it's back to just being a rich person's house with a bunch of land that they probably, I don't know, hang poachers on or something like that.
Listen, even rich people need many places to live. Okay.
Exactly. They all need multiple 17-room houses just in case they get tired of the previous one. So I think that, again, very cool. And it leads to an environment when you're recording in that type of isolation where you can really dive into the project. And Rob and I, we've done that a couple of times where, we've stayed at a place for, granted, not 6-7 weeks, more like 3-4 days, but you really do get to immerse yourself in the project. And I think that can lead to a lot of creativity. I also do think the fact that the producers on this album were just the three people making the music, not having that outside voice come in with some kind of clout to be able to say, hey, I think you should make different decisions here, make different decisions here, can lead to a product that becomes a little myopic and maybe doesn't reach its full potential. And that might have been what happened on some of this. Interestingly, she actually said that for her next album, she's like, I don't want anybody else to have any production credits on it, just me. I think that might have been the wrong lesson to take from this.
It reminds me of that Onion headline where it's like area band heads out to the mountains to make shitty album or something.
Yeah. Done that a couple times. Actually, to make pretty decent albums.
I'm proud of everything. I'm proud of all our children, Tom.
Yes. Love them all equally, right? So this album, it does mark a drastically different approach to how she can structure songs. Not just that it's more focused on the vocals, less affected soundscapes, also in tone. So she again had more of a dark aesthetic, more of this kind of provocative aesthetic. I mean, she had a whole bunch of nicknames like, good Lord, let me pull up some of these nicknames here. This is how the critics were describing her before she was before she put this album out. They called her the daughter of darkness, the ice queen, a strapping rock and roll Amazon, the rock bitch from hell.
Jesus.
And so I respect the fact that that's the vibe that you had previously. That's how people knew you. And then you choose to put out an album like this, which none of those descriptors would fit the artist that is putting this album out.
Well, I feel like those descriptors to me befit someone more like Susie Sue or somebody that's doing like that's a little bit more in that sort of goth space or that's really trying to make dark music. It feels like it belies I think what she's doing a little bit.
But I'm sure they were drawing some comparisons to someone like Susie Sue or a Patti Smith or people of that nature, right, over the years.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. And she did say that she wanted to have this be less dark. She wanted to make it kind of delicate and beautiful as opposed to jagged and dark. And I do think that, again, a very marked departure from her previous style. Whether or not that's going to give you guys the oomph to put this one on the list or not, we shall soon find out because I think it's about time to get into some of these individual songs.